They are cops accused of crossing the line, and while they were never convicted of any crimes, their alleged conduct still cost you plenty.
Tonight, 7 investigator Russ Jones digs into which Detroit police officers are costing the city the most and why many are still on the job tonight.
He said he was going to kill me over and over. I will kill you right now. I will kill you right now.
The men who Keenan Ellsbury says threatened his life weren't criminals or members of a gang. These men carried a badge. The trouble started in the wee hours of the morning on May 2nd, 2011. On his way to his ex-wife's home in Rosedale Park, Detroit cops said Ellsbury made a right turn without signaling, and they tried to pull him over. They said he didn't stop his car until pulling into his ex-wife's driveway.
They told me to turn around, put your hands up. My hands were up, and I just got tackled. You know, they handcuffed me, choking me, kneeing me. The whole time they were asking for drugs and guns. Where are the drugs and guns? Where are the drugs and guns?
Ellsbury said he wasn't resisting the officers, but in their reports, cops wrote that he swung a closed fist at them, hitting an officer in the chin and later grabbing for his gun. He was charged with assaulting and resisting a police officer, with at least 3 cops ready to testify against him. But before the case went to trial, another officer there that night came forward, saying Ellsbury was the victim of police brutality. He told Internal Affairs that Ellsbury was handcuffed and not resisting while Officer Justin Lyons delivered 2 knee strikes to his midsection. He said Officer William Ziola stepped on the side of Ellsbury's face, calling him an expletive. The injuries were bad enough that Ellsbury was taken to the hospital. Doctors there said he suffered blunt trauma to his chest, a ruptured eardrum, and a minor closed head injury. The charges against him were later dropped, and he filed suit against the cops. It was then that Ellsbury learned they'd been accused before.
It's good for my business. It's bad for the city of Detroit.
Attorneys like Dan Romano have taken hundreds of Detroit cops to court through the years, often, he says, the very same ones. Cops like Ray Moxley Berry, sued at least 4 times for misconduct. The city settled each for a total of $315,000. Officer Brian LaPerriere has been sued at least 6 times. Those settlements cost taxpayers at least $600,000. And then there's Officer Juan Reynoso, sued at least 4 times. One incident where he shot an unarmed man resulted in criminal charges, but they were ultimately dismissed. Lawsuits against Reynoso have paid out almost $2.5 million in settlements. In each case we've told you about, the city admitted no wrongdoing, and none of the officers were ever convicted of a crime.
We should be concerned. I look at that's a red flag.
We shared our findings with Willie Bell. He's the vice president of the Detroit Board of Police Commissioners, and for 30 years before that, he was a Detroit cop.
I don't think you can take this lightly that they just want to settle. I think they want to settle because of the issues involved.
In fact, according to city records, more than 80 Detroit police officers, both past and present, have been sued at least 3 times, with one officer recording 8 total lawsuits. The city won't release his or her name, along with any other officer who's worked in an undercover capacity.
Even though the officer is right, a municipality will settle out of court, which implies the officer did something wrong, when that is not the case at all.
Mark Diaz is the president of the Detroit Police Officers Association. He said simply settling a case doesn't mean an officer was at fault. Frivolous lawsuits, he says, are just an ugly part of being a cop.
The more contact they have with the criminal element, the more likely they are to draw complaints, and as well as the false allegations that the officers did something wrong.
But is the city of Detroit going to write a 6 or even a 7-figure check if that officer really did everything right?
It absolutely depends on the circumstance.
If we see like conduct, different allegations are made, and a series of not resolved allegations, in my view, that's a pattern of conduct.
Chief James Craig said he wasn't familiar with any of the lawsuits filed before he got on the job 2 years ago, and he wouldn't talk about any officers by name. So we tried to ask him a question he would answer.
If one officer in the city of Detroit has cost taxpayers $2.5 million in settlements, how confident are you that that officer who's still on the job today should be?
Well, let me just say, I would be concerned enough to take a look at it, and off camera, I would like to have the name of the individual so that I can personally take a look at it.
We shared the name of that officer and a whole host of others with Chief Craig when we talked to him last week. His office told us yesterday he had no further comment. Keenan Aylesbury's lawsuit against the city is still ongoing. In fact, so is the internal affairs probe into the officer's conduct that night. It's been going on for 4 years and counting. A police spokesman wouldn't elaborate as to why. I'm Ross Jones, 7 Action News.